Now that we have covered how to add data into text analytics, let's modify the ingested data to change identified entities and relationships as well as create new ones. To do this, we are going to use the markup window and the machine learning features of text analytics. In a later tutorial, we will cover dictionaries and entity extraction scripts as a means to change the system's entity and relationship recognition. To access the markup window, open the Document View panel for the given document. Using the navigation bar at the top of the panel, open the markup window by clicking the Edit button. In the opened window, you will find various panels. Located in the center is the text content of the document, highlighted based on the entities currently recognized by the system. On the right is the ontology currently being used for the project. The ontology is where we define and detail the entity and relationship types we are looking to identify. If we click on an identified entity in the document, the panel on the left will populate. This panel will display the profile that the system has started to build on the entity based on the textual evidence in the document. From this panel, we can modify the various attributes associated with the instance, as well as modify connections and text references. Now that we have covered the interface of the markup window, let's discuss creating and modifying entities and relationships in the data. We will start by looking at the ontology. Click the Edit button in the ontology panel to open the ontology for modification. In the opened window, you will see 3 columns. The first is the list of entity and sub-entity types. The second holds the options for markup type, which includes document entity, text reference only, or no markup. The last column contains the option to add a subclass to an entity or to delete the entity type altogether. Let's create a new entity type. Click the plus button located at the top right of the screen. Create a name for the entity type. In this case, we will make a political party entity type. When creating entity names, it is good practice to not include any spaces. Once the entity type is created, we need to configure the text markup type. By default, the document entity type will be selected. This means that any political parties we recognize will be represented as a node in our network, which will allow us to conduct link chart analysis. If we select text reference only, the entity type will only be highlighted in the text and not shown in the network. Because we want this entity to be shown in the network, we will leave it as the default markup type. We can also change the coloring for the entity type if necessary by clicking the color palette icon. Now let's look at creating a new relationship type. By scrolling down to the bottom of the ontology, we will find the relationship section. For each relationship, you will see the entity types that comprise the relationship as well as the role of each. You will also find options for deleting the relationship or changing the color, like we can do with entity types. To create a new relationship, scroll to the bottom of the window and click Add Link Type. First, enter a name. Just like the entity types, spaces should not be used. It can be helpful to name the relationship based on the entity types that define it. This will be a relationship between a person and a political party, so we will call it person-party. Now that the relationship has been created, we need to configure it. First, enable the document markup for the relationship. Next, we can define the entity types that make up the relationship using the dropdown. We will select person for one and political party for the other. With each entity type we select, we also need to detail what role that entity plays in the relationship. For example, we could detail a role for a person as has party, and create a role for a political party as party of. For each relationship, we could also define a keyword, which is a detail that contextualizes the relationship. For example, the position-organization relationship has a keyword listed as position. The linkage is built between the person and the organization, while the keyword provides further context. Keywords are not required, so we will leave it blank. To save the changes we have made, click Save and Close at the bottom of the window. Now that we have added a new entity and relationship type, we can start to identify examples in the text. It is important to note that, going forward, if we have machine learning enabled, which we enabled when we created our first project, changes we make in this document in regards to entities and relationships can be applied to other documents in the collection, as well as any new files ingested. If machine learning is not enabled, changes we make will only apply to this document and will not be saved upon reprocessing. Let's begin by recognizing a new entity instance. To do this, first identify a section of text in the document to be recognized. Then, select an entity type from the ontology. With the entity type selected, hold Control on your keyboard and drag your cursor over the text to be recognized, letting go once all of the text has been highlighted. The entity instance will now be created and the panel on the left-hand side of the screen will populate. To change the entity type of an already identified instance, click on the entity instance you'd like to change. In the left-hand panel, click the Change Entity Type button in the top right-hand corner. Follow the prompts on the opened window and select the new entity type for the instance from the ontology. Then click Change Entity Type. This will change all text references of the instance to the new entity type. Deleting recognized entities can be done using the trash can icon found in the right-hand corner of the panel. For each entity instance, we can modify or add new attributes if needed. We can also create connections from the relationship types defined in the ontology. First, identify a section in the text to form the relationship. Then, select one of the entities that will comprise the relationship. From the left-hand panel, click Create New. In the opened window, start by selecting the relationship using the dropdown. Then fill the selected slot for the other entity instance to complete the relationship. Click Create to establish the connection. Entity instances with relationships in the text can be easily identified as they will have a number associated with them, representing the amount of connections that instance has. Remember, the changes we have made so far only apply to this document. To apply the changes across the collection, we need to reprocess our documents. We can do this by navigating back to the collection. Once on the collection screen, click the Reprocess button. From the opened window, ensure that Default plus Network Update is selected from the drop-down window, then click Reprocess. A number will appear on the Background Tasks tab. Once the number disappears, the reprocessing is complete and the changes we have made will be applied to all the documents in our collection. In the next video, we will introduce networks and begin to explore the entities and relationships in our collection using link chart analysis.